when we jump into the second chapter of Moed Katan, we're going to come across two parallel issues. One is the question of financial loss. So to what extent we're prepared to work on the intermediate days of the festival in order to avoid financial loss. And the second is the question of mourning. To what extent we can carry out different activities when after a relative has died. And the Mishnah or the Gemara is going to mention both issues, and the Gemara is actually going to connect them up. And some of the halachot about mourning are actually, most of the halachot about mourning in the Talmud are actually learned in the tractate of Moed Katan. And the connection between the festival and the avalut, between mourning and festivity is obscure. It's not quite clear to me why the Gemara wants to bring these together. It's as if we're bringing together two opposite poles. But anyway, let's look at the three Mishnayot today, and we'll see the connections. And maybe as we go through the Masechet, it'll become clear as to why the Mishnah brings these topics together. Misha hafach et zeitav, someone who'd turned over his olives. So people would put olives in a sack or a storage area to nowadays you actually do it with salt, although I think for olive oil perhaps not with salt. You'd pick them, you'd put them to mature, and then you turn them over before pressing them. So this is someone who's halfway through the process of curing the olives prior to pressing them. So someone's turned over his olives, or evel or ones, and something happens that's beyond his control. The Mishnah says evel or ones, mourning or some circumstance beyond his control. Something happens he can't control. Or shehituhu, or maybe people misled him. Some versions of the Mishnah actually have the word workers here, or shehituhu poalim. The printed versions mainly have the word workers, although the Kaufman manuscript does not have the word workers. It doesn't make much difference, actually. Somehow he was misled. Somehow he got into a situation where he can't continue pressing his olives for reasons completely out of his control. And this is a financial, olives are incredibly valuable crops. And to be halfway through, get through the harvest, and then to have the pressing process arrested is a financial disaster. It means effectively one's going to lose the monetary value of the crop. And the rabbis aren't going to allow us to do that. And Rabbi Yehuda and Rabbi Yossi have different suggestions. The halacha actually goes according to Rabbi Yossi, but we're going to hear first from Rabbi Yehuda. Rabbi Yehuda says he puts on the first beam, or he puts on a beam at first. The Mishnah could be read either way. So he's going to put these olives on a press, and he's going to put a beam on. It seems as though putting this heavy beam on top of the press is going to start the flow of the olive oil. And then he's going to leave it until after the festival. In other words, he's going to start the pressing process, but he's not going to finish it off until after the festival. Divrei Rabbi Yehuda, this is Rabbi Yehuda. Rabbi Yossi says, Rabbi Yossi Omer, Zolef vegomer vekaf kadarko. Rabbi Yossi says he pours it out, he finishes it, he corks it just in the usual way. In other words, once you started something on Chol Moed, you're going to finish it. And the same is going to apply to wine. We're going to have a parallel Mishnah discussing the question of wine. In this case, Rabbi Yossi and Rabbi Yehuda are reversed in the sense that, they have the same opinion as they held in the previous Mishnah, but Rabbi Yossi is going to come first. But you'll see that the language of the Mishnah is almost identical. Similarly, someone who had his wine in the pit. So this is someone who's thrown his grapes into the press, and he started to press them, and the wine is dripping out of the press. Is dripping out of the press from the bottom of the press into a cistern. This is going to be a special wine cistern, not going to be a general cistern. The Hebrew is bor, but this is clearly a cistern that's designated for wine. Someone had his wine in a cistern. And the same language, ve'ero evel or ones, or shehituhu poalim, or maybe some mourning or some circumstance beyond his control befell him, or someone misled him. Maybe these are the workers who misled him. Again, the word workers does not appear in the Kaufman manuscript. Zolefe gomer vegaf kadarko, exactly the same word, Rabbi Yossi's expression. He pours it out, he finishes it, he corks it up in the usual way. Divrei Rabbi Yossi. Rabbi Yossi says you finish it off on Chol Moed. And the Gemara learns from this, by the way, that this is something that you would not do as a mourner. So we're learning what you can do on Chol Moed, but at the same time, we're learning what you wouldn't do as a mourner. As a mourner, you're going to sit back and you're going to refrain from your usual activities. You're not going to, this is someone in their 7 days, right? In your 7 days, you're not going to carry out these activities. Rabbi Yehuda Omer, remember Rabbi Yehuda in the previous Mishnah was all for a quick fix. Rabbi Yehuda Omer, Oselo limudim bishvil shelo yachmitz. Rabbi Yehuda says he makes limudim. Now, limudim seem to be some kind of boards that lay on top of one another. There, Jastrow translates them as shingles. Shingles are overlapping boards. Seems that we're going to make some kind of wooden cover for this cistern that's got the wine in it. So Rabbi Yehuda Omer Osel limudim. Rabbi Yehuda says he makes these shingle boards for it, for the cistern, bishvil shelo yachmitz, so it won't turn into vinegar. So we're going to take care of our wine in some way. We're going to avoid financial loss, but not to the extent that we would avoid it according to Rabbi Yossi, although the halacha goes according to Rabbi Yossi. And along the same lines, someone can bring his produce in for fear of thieves. So again, we wouldn't normally bring our produce in on Chol Moed because that really is professional work. We're avoiding professional work, but we have a loss. We have a severe financial loss if the thieves plunder our orchard right at the end of the harvest time. Remember, we could be around Sukkot, so everything could be on the trees at this point. Similarly, and you can pull your flax out of the mishra. The mishra seems to be the liquid which the flax is steeping in. It's translated by Kahati actually as the steep. Mishra is a word that actually appears in Tanakh. It's in the Sefer Bamidbar, but in the context of grapes, which are sort of steeping, the remains of the grapes are steeping in the wine press. This is something that it's part of wine manufacture, actually. The fact that wine is red is to do with the fact that we let the skins sit in the juice for a little bit before we kind of take the juice out. If we take the skins out straight away, we're going to get white wine. If we leave them in for a few minutes, we'll get rosé. If we leave them in for a long time, we get red. This is the steep, which is referred to in Bamidbar, actually in the context of the Nazir. But here we seem to be steeping the flax, and if the flax is left in too long, then it ruins. And again, when the rabbis are not going to involve us in severe financial loss, so a person can bring his produce in for fear of thieves, and can pull his flax out of the steep so it doesn't spoil. But there's a condition. But we only do this providing he doesn't actually intend to do this on the Moed. So the first two examples were circumstances beyond his control. Something happened, something let him down, a relative, his father died, a relative died, he's in mourning, something happened. And if something happens, the rabbis will let us avoid loss. But if we organize our work in order to carry out work on Chol Moed, this is beyond the boundary. Because remember, we began this Masachet by learning that to a certain extent, Chol Moed is a festival. And in principle, we don't work on it. The rabbis, fine, the rabbis will tell us what work we do and what we don't do. But in principle, Chol Moed is a festival. So, as long as he doesn't intend to do, or he doesn't plan to do this work on the Moed, vechulam im kivnu malachtan b'moed yovedu, and all those who intend to do their work on a festival must leave it to spoil. If you do your work on a festival, you leave it to spoil. You cannot set out with that intention.